Well, if you're wondering what the best decks in Hearthstone were, then you came to the right place. Let me just jump into this for you. So I'm just going to go down the list. Usually I break it up and edit a ton of stuff, but I'm just going to do it in one quick shot this time to see how that works. Tell me if you guys like it in the comments below. So basically, the first one is going to have to be Token Druid. Token Druid is absolutely insane. It's got very few counterplays. The only things that can really beat it are super hard control decks that can wipe the board twice over, like Warrior with like Rancor into Bladestorm, or Bladestorm Rancor, whatever, or Brawl Bladestorm. You get the point. Or super hard aggro decks that just kill you a little bit too fast, like Face Hunter. But even then, unless they get a really good hand, they're probably not going to win. If you get Gibberling early and maybe an Innervate or a Lightning Bloom or the Coin, the game is usually just over because you snowball super hard. And even if you don't have a good early game, you can just go for something like Glowfly Swarm, Soul of the Forest, or Glowfly Swarm Arbor Up a little bit later on, around turn, 5 to 7, depending on what ramp cards you have, and that can be absolutely devastating for the opponent, because even though they have more mana to deal with it now, again, there isn't that much they can do. Like Warlock, Twisting Nether, if you played Soul of the Forest, doesn't do anything, and you only really need one Soul of the Forest, because usually, since the meta is very aggressive in mid-range now, they don't have insane board wipes, so it's better to just pump them up with Arbor Up and Pride's Fury. Also, don't forget to Solar Eclipse to double activate Arbor Up whenever possible, because that is insane. The next deck to climb with is Face Hunter, wherever it is. 1 second, Face Hunter, boom, right here. And it's just because it's really, really strong and fast. And it's one of the best decks to climb with because of how fast you can run through your opponent. I've lost games against Face Hunter where I feel like there's no way that I can lose, and then I'm like, okay, over the next 3 turns I take 15 damage after them just top decking and playing the best cards they can, because they hero power every turn, and if you're not playing Priest or Warrior, you're always at risk of dying to a Face Hunter. And if you're playing Face Hunter, you're most likely going to be winning a lot of games, because, I mean, my personal win rate with this deck is like 23 and 12 or something right now. It's really, really strong. So yeah, just throwing that out there. There's not a lot to say about this deck. You just kind of go with the flow, just go face, play whatever you can on curve as fast as possible, and that's basically it. The next deck is Elemental Shaman, and I am not a huge fan of Elemental Shaman personally. Actually, that's a lie. I'm a pretty big fan of Elemental Shaman. I was just going to say I personally like Doomhammer Shaman a little bit more, but it is worse. And it's more of a personal preference kind of thing. But this deck is definitely better than Doomhammer Shaman. On Hearthstone Replay, its win rate is almost 4% higher. You've got good late game. There are 2 different versions. There's the aggro version and the more mid-range version, which runs similar to this, except it also runs Alexstrasza. They both have about the same win rates, though, on Hearthstone Replay, so I'd say that they're both comparable. So it's up to you which one you want to run. I just know one of them runs Alexstrasza and or Brucan for some extra burst, and then this one does not. In fact, it's very similar. There are only like 2 cards that are different, and they're entirely different decks in Hearthstone Replay. This is the one I would recommend. It's the one I've produced the most with. Basically, the only difference is they take out Gyreworm and put in a couple of extra things, and it's not that big of a difference. So, moving on to the next one, because we've already established Elemental Shaman is good. So is Aggro Elemental Shaman and just normal Elemental Shaman. But you've got Deathrattle Demon Hunter. Deathrattle Demon Hunter is a deck that really took off with the new mini expansion. They've got the Devouring Ectoplasm and the Fell Rattler, which help a ton into early aggro decks. Because dealing 1 damage to all enemy minions can completely wipe the board or be huge. It's essentially a 4 attack rush minion. Worst case scenario, it's a 3 mana 4/2 to a singular minion. Devouring Ectoplasm is just good in general. It's got good draw. Razorboar being a 3/2 actually is a big difference because it can trade up into 3 health minions now, and can apply a little bit more pressure. The N'Zoth buff, making it 9, means that you can play it 1 turn sooner, so that way you can play N'Zoth turn 9, get an Illidari Inquisitor, and then if it's turn 10, obviously, for 9 mana, you also have enough mana to hero power, and then you can hit with the Illidari Inquisitor in their face. And those 2 buffs and the new cards made this deck go from middle of the pack tier 2 to near the top of tier 1. So it's very strong. I would highly recommend trying this deck out. And now we are moving on to a deck that I've really liked recently, and that is Frenzy Rush Warrior. This deck's got a lot of things going for it. It's got some cool frenzy mechanics. I also like the fact that my personal build runs the frenzy draw card minion, which I think is also quite strong because drawing a card is really this deck's biggest weakness. It runs out of steam. So having one extra card that draws you a card with a Stonewall Anchorman while also applying pressure is huge. And then sometimes you can get it back with the Surfang, although if you get Kresh or Razormane Raider, that is also quite strong. And then you have the same good late game with Troublemaker Alexstrasza, and yeah, it's very similar to Old Rush Warrior with a slightly better package, in my opinion, with some draw. Next, moving on to a couple of other more niche decks. You've got Control Priest, wherever I put that. Obviously, there are different ways you can build a Control Priest. This is the one that I've personally been running. It requires some skill to play, so it takes a while, and it's hard to play. So if you misplay, you sometimes will just lose games that you could have ultimately won. But if you really take the time to learn this deck, you could perform really, really well with it. Like, I started off with like a 50-ish% win rate with Control Priest, and I built it up, and this was last season, to where this season it's like 60, which still isn't that high. And I know that people at higher ranks who play this deck a lot more than I do even better. But that just goes to show you that over time, your win rate will go up with this deck. Same with like OTK Demon Hunter, although I don't recommend that unless you're in top 1000 Legend, because top 1000 Legend has a less aggressive meta, so OTK Demon Hunter is able to do stuff. And then the last deck I would recommend is OTK Warrior. It's another warrior deck. It's a control deck that's very good against the aggro meta, and it has anesthetic Swampus as well to help control the board and kill off weapons a little bit. But it's also good against control decks because you have the Silas OTK and or Cthulhu to close out games late. Overall, I think that this deck is very good because it has good draw, has OTK potential, has Cthulhu, so you're less likely to die in fatigue, and you also have Southsea Scoundrel to make them draw more cards and potentially lose in fatigue a little bit sooner. There aren't any other decks I really want to talk about right now. The only other deck that I kind of want to talk about, I guess, is Fringe, is the Libram Paladin deck that I've been running a little bit. It's been doing pretty well. It's a small sample size. It's only like 4 games. I'm 3-1, but the 3 games felt good, and even though I lost one of the games, it was really close, and I drew 3 of my 4 secrets within my first 5 turns. So it was an absolutely awful hand that would almost always lose, and it still ended up doing okay against an Elemental Shaman. So, who also randomly got a Devolving Missiles off of a Guidance or whatever and got rid of my Legions of Wisdom. Basically, everything went wrong that game, and I still almost won. So I actually think that this deck has some good potential. I would recommend trying it out if you haven't already. Especially a lot of people probably still have a lot of their Paladin cards. Just saying this deck doesn't suck. But anyway, the last thing I want to talk about is the stuff to try and avoid. The stuff you want to try to avoid, basically, anything that starts with Warlock or ends with Warlock. Like, you know, Death or Demon, Warlock, or whatever. Warlock, Mage, or Rogue. Those 3 classes are absolutely dog right now, and even though Rogue can be good at higher ranks, against Shaman, Deathrattle Demon Hunter, and Face Hunter, Rogue just isn't allowed to play the game. You're not allowed to combo off in time, and you will sometimes win games, but the vast majority will end up in losses. So yeah, those are the decks to avoid. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.